I think a lot of people who are trying to get their first laundromat will have loved this interview. Number one, do you have like one piece of advice? Say there's somebody that was you, 12 months ago, looking for that laundromat. Do you have one piece of advice on what could help them get that first laundromat?
I mean, it's a little, I guess, counterintuitive advice, but just
when you're getting into the business, just like you're saying, like, hey, just make sure you've got a little runway, you've got a little cushion, and that you've got as clear of an understanding of the business as you can before it becomes yours too, right? And you kind of reference like, maybe if it's not making as much money as you thought it was, and which happens a lot in this business. So do the best you can, and but just know that the less runway you have on the back end after the purchase in terms of money, the riskier it becomes.
You probably would lose a lot more sleep over buying something you shouldn't have bought than not buying something you could have or should have, perhaps. I mean, you never know if you should have if you didn't buy it, but don't force a deal.
I will vouch for everything that you're saying. It is much worse to buy something that you shouldn't have bought and having to deal with the consequences of that for long periods of time rather than passing even on a good deal. If you pass on, I'd rather pass on a good deal than buy a bad deal all day, every day, as somebody who has bought a bad deal and suffered the consequences of that.
These were not answers that I couldn't have thought of on my own, but it's very hard to have conversations with yourself. So by the end of me spitting out a sentence to Coach John, as I call him, I already knew the answer that he was going to give me because I knew what I needed to do. But when you're sitting in a room by yourself, it's very easy to have negative self-talk and talk yourself out of doing the uncomfortable thing.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jordan with the Laundromat Resource Podcast. This is show 185, and I am pumped you are here today because today we have on the show Jeff Grampp, who has just got this systematic way of running his business that I love. I absolutely love it. And we're going to go through a lot of details. You're going to get a lot out of it. I guarantee it. Money back guarantee right there. Before we jump into it with Jeff Grampp. Grampp. Maybe I should just call him Grampp. I don't think you'd like that. I'm going to call him Jeff. Before we jump into it with Jeff, today's fast lane tip is this. Make sure you keep an eye on events happening at Laundromat Resource, laundromatresource.com/events to check that out. And also make sure you're signed up on the email list because we email out those events as they come out. But hey, we've always got stuff going on. We've got webinars going on. We've got Q&As going on. We've got meetups going on. We've got all kinds of stuff going on all the time. So make sure you check out laundromatresource.com/events. All right, let's jump into it with Jeff, not Gramps. And Jeff Grampp today, right now. Hey, listen, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Jeff, thanks for coming on the show, man. How you doing?
I'm great, Jordan. Appreciate you hosting me. Thanks so much.
Dude, it is my pleasure. I'm super excited about this. And man, I just learned that you're like right down the street from my house. So we should have just done this thing in person. Next time. I mean,
maybe in Hawaii.
Hey, that's not Hawaii. Yeah. I'm in Hawaii right now. So maybe we should come out here and do an episode or two. That'd be a lot of fun.
You need me to get your mail, just let me know.
That's right. Any volunteers? Yeah, dude. Well, hey, I'm excited to jump into this thing. Why don't you give us a little background to who you are, and then we'll jump into how you got in this business.
Sure. So my name is Jeff Grampp. Was born and raised in Southern California here in Orange County. I would say at an early age was kind of a numbers, money, finance person. So kind of followed that path pretty quickly from kind of, I don't know, maybe high school time, got my undergrad degree in business, and have been working in kind of the financial services industry for pretty much all my working career. As I started building some, wealth and getting some savings, started thinking, okay, what's out there that I can do? I think probably like a lot of people went to real estate as kind of the easiest path, I guess. So I acquired a few residential investment properties, kind of around pre-COVID. And then in the first maybe 12 or 18 months post-COVID, bought a few. As I think a lot of us know, prices, interest rates, like everything was going against buying those kinds of assets. So took a step back and said, what's really out there of other kinds of assets to look at. Started getting into the Cody Sanchez's of the world and yourself, and seeing all the people putting out really good content for these other asset classes. And so laundromats quickly kind of fell into the things that seemed kind of attainable and that I could get my arms around of an asset class. And so that's kind of what I think first got me into this particular entrepreneurial journey relative to kind of more passive real estate investing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I love that. I think there's a lot of real estate investors that are like, man, where can I go? Where can I put my money right now? Out of curiosity, did you buy your real estate in California? Did you buy out of state? How'd you do that?
So I was fortunate enough that I owned a small townhome in Orange County. Was able to hang on to that and buy a single family home to start a family with. So that was kind of the first one, just kind of fell into it. And then, California real estate, I'm more of a value kind of buyer, and I can't make sense of that. So out of state I went. And so I bought a couple properties in Tennessee and one in Kansas City, Missouri.
Nice.
And so that's, and then, and then everywhere went crazy. And so I'm kind of on the sidelines on the real estate side for now.
I know. Yeah. It's wild because it used to be like, hey, you're in California. It just makes sense to go to the Midwest to buy these properties. But now you go look in the Midwest and you're like, dang, man, it's expensive out there too. So I'm sure you guys in the Midwest are feeling it. And we do apologize from California to all of you for driving your prices up. Sorry about that. Awesome. Okay. So you got into just kind of looking where else to put your money and stumbled on laundromats. Can you talk to me just a little bit about okay, you started seeing laundromats, you got intrigued by that. How'd you start that process? How'd you start that journey towards owning one?
Yeah. So for my day job, I'll call it my day job, which I still have. So that still produces, pays the mortgage and all that good stuff. A lot of research goes into my day-to-day work. So naturally, researching everything I can about car washes, vending machine routes, laundromats. Very quickly, it'd kind of be like, I don't know, once or twice a week, I'd do an hour or two of research. I'd find something else I didn't know. There's kind of that period where you don't know anything, and then you think you know a decent amount, and then you realize you actually know nothing. And it's kind of that, I think they call it the pit of despair, where you know enough to know you really don't know that much. Yeah. And I'd kind of get frustrated or just kind of I guess lacking the confidence to move forward. So I just said, I can't figure out how to run a laundromat. And so I just kind of, let it go. A week later, I do the same thing. And then I had a personal development coach I was working with, once a month, we'd kind of meet and talk about, what do you want out of life? Are you making progress? And he finally kicked me in the pants enough to say hey man, just what's the harm in talking to some owners and talking to some brokers? No one's going to, grab your hand and make you write them a check to buy something you don't want. So go have some conversations and see what happens. And so finally started doing that. Probably 2-ish years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. Okay. Quickly got, I think probably a lot of other podcast guests you've had, brokers can be tough to deal with. They get, I'm sure, 100 calls a day from tire kickers and people that don't know anything. And so for me, I have no small business experience. I have some money, but I'm not, a millionaire who can just write checks for these kind of businesses. And so I found it really hard to get the attention from brokers to be taken seriously. And so very quickly realized that probably wasn't going to be a good route for me to effectively get anything. And being kind of a stingy value buyer like I was on the real estate side, am I going to be the highest bidder with a broker whose literal goal it is to get the highest price possible, right? Like that's not a good situation for me to be in. And so started looking at, all right, how can I go off market? I think one of the things you have on your website is like, hey, here's kind of a template to go just reach out to owners and start a conversation. And so I happily took that and put my name at the bottom. I made some tweaks,
Nice.
but it was a great resource. And me and I think she would have been 5-year-old daughter at the time, hand wrote 200 pieces of mail to all the laundromats within, I don't know, 20 or 30 miles of my house. And off we went to see what kind of response we would get.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And I think there's a lot to pull out of there. And especially if you're out there and you're trying to get started with your first laundromat, I think there's a lot to learn here. So, I mean, I want to go back just, first of all, kudos to you for having a personal development coach. Like that's a big deal. And I think in this industry in particular, I've just noticed, and I see a little bit less of it, but I see a lot of like DIYers in this industry and people who, like to learn. And honestly, like this is sort of my nature too, is like a lot of us just like to learn the hard way for some reason. Like we just like to figure it out, and it takes decades and eventually you just figure it out. Right. And I am more and more understanding the value of having somebody outside perspective speaking into your life and helping push you in the directions that you say you want to go. Because it can be really easy for me, at least, to talk myself out of doing the things that I say I want to do, or to procrastinate on them, or all those things, right? So kudos to you on having that coach. Do you feel like, I mean, it seems like that coach has not only just kind of helped you push you in the direction you wanted to go, but has sort of accelerated that journey. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and a lot of it, what I always found interesting is like these were not answers that I couldn't have thought of on my own, but it's very hard to have conversations with yourself. So by the end of me spitting out a sentence to Coach John, as I call him, I already knew the answer that he was going to give me, because I knew what I needed to do. But when you're sitting in a room by yourself, it's very easy to have negative self-talk and talk yourself out of doing the uncomfortable thing. It's very comfortable to watch your podcast episodes, or some of the other thought leaders, or watch a video on how to repair a machine. I don't have to do anything after that, right? Like you're not going to come knock on my door and say, "Hey, Jeff, did you call that broker? Or did you?"
Well, now that I know you're local, I might do that. So be careful. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fair warning.
Yeah. So it's nice. I mean, and even if, it wasn't cheap to have a coach like that. Even having friends in your network to just say, "Can you call me in a week?" and like kick me in the pants and make sure I did the thing I said I was going to do. And just finding something, or a family member who can provide some kind of accountability to follow through on the things that you say you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, listen, again, my forever, I had that sort of DIY mindset, that lone wolf kind of mindset. And, now, I mean, I've been pretty open. Like I pay lots of money every single year to have people like that in my life. Coaches, I have a one-on-one coach. I've got a mastermind group that I'm in, who I'm actually in 2 mastermind groups, and we meet every single week and we go over, the things that we say we're going to do. And I know that if I don't do the things that I said I was going to do this week, I'm going to hear about it from my mastermind groups, right? Like, and it gives that little extra motivation. Like you said, like most of the time, it's nothing that I couldn't come up with on my own, right? But like you said, having somebody to talk through things with, having somebody to hold you accountable I just think it's invaluable. And it does feel like it's an expense. It does feel expensive, and I pay over $25,000 a year for that stuff. And that's a lot of money. Like there's no getting around that. That's a lot of money. But I think I know for a fact my ROI is significantly more than that just from having those people in my life. So, anyways, I just wanted to kind of hit on that because I think that's a big deal. And I think it's something that resonates with me because it's not my natural ability. It's an area of growth for me. And it's almost like a leap of faith there for that.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to define. Like when I buy a new machine, a new washer, I kind of have a sense of what I can get out of that. It's harder to find with a coach, but yeah, I totally agree. Like I've gotten multiples in terms of an ROI on that, both financially as well as just lifestyle, getting comfortable with what do you want your life to be and how do we work with each other to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Well, I could geek out on that with you all day, but I won't because people will stop listening. So
fair enough.
Okay, so you were sort of pushed into like, hey, get out there and just chat with some people, which is good, right? Like one of the things I hear all the time is like, I was thinking about buying a laundromat forever and just never did. And like I said, it's very comfortable to, just kind of listen to the podcast, watch the YouTube videos, scroll the TikToks, all that stuff. But taking that action is important to do. And so you started reaching out to brokers and stuff. This is a complaint I hear all the time on how do I actually get a broker to call me back? How do I do that? Right. So that was a struggle for you. I mean, did you try for a little bit and then just like throw in the towel and be like, this is not for me? Or what did that process look like for you?
I probably talked to maybe three brokers. I probably called more than that, but that was like the amount that I talked to. I mean, it was helpful to just sign some NDAs and get some financials on a few businesses. I didn't take those very far. But every broker was the same conversation of, well, how much money do you have in the bank? What business experience do you have? And all these things that like putting myself in, and I don't harbor much ill will. I harbor a little ill will.
A little bit. Yeah.
Not I get where they're coming from. Like their job is to sell this business for as much as possible to get their commission. Talking to this guy who cannot make a cash offer and has never owned a business before sounds like not a great use of my time. And if there's another guy or gal who's got a bunch of experience and can write a check, that's where I'd be spending my time. So I realized that it would not be my first approach. If the dialing for dollars mailing strategy didn't work, I probably would have gone back and tried to make the broker strategy work. But I just thought it would be a better use of my time to go that route.
Yeah. And that's real. I mean, everything you're saying is real, right? And I'm speaking as a broker, like I've brokered laundromats, right? And so, and especially right now in today's market where there's just a lot more buyers than there are sellers, especially in Southern California or in California in general, some of the bigger markets, especially there, New York, New Jersey, some of the Florida markets, some of the Texas market, Chicago, like there's more buyers than sellers. And so brokers have the, I guess, luxury of being pretty picky, which makes it tough, right? If you're not coming in with a cash offer, if this is your first business, it can be discouraging when those are the questions you're getting when you finally actually do get a hold of a broker and then you never hear from brokers again, or they never call you back in the first place. So it can be tough. However, with all that said, I still think, it's a viable way to pursue buying a laundromat, right? And but I want to get into what you did because I think this is the big lesson that I wanted to get to here. So you decided, okay, I'm going to go look for my own deal, and you decided to write letters. And I don't know how accurate the number is, but you said you wrote like 200 letters.
Yeah, I've got the Excel sheet. It's like 206 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And my point here that I wanted to get to is I hear all the time, I sent out letters and I didn't hear anything back. And when I asked the question, okay, well, how many letters did you send out? And I get like 8, 12, even 20 letters. Listen, this is a little bit of a numbers game here, right? You've got to send out enough volume. And sometimes you're going to have to send the same 206 people another letter or two, right? For you to find that deal.
Yep.
So, I mean, first of all, kudos to you for getting after it. How did you decide to say, okay, I'm going to send out 200 letters? What made you decide to do that?
I basically went on Google Maps. I started around my house. And that's not true. I found a list of all the zip codes around our house. And then I just went through on Google Maps and I wrote down all the addresses of all the laundromats until I got far enough out where I said, I wouldn't want, that commute, which I think was roughly 20 to 30 minutes one way, something like that. And so if that number was 50 or if it was 1,000, maybe not, I don't know if I would have done 1,000, but 200 felt like a good starting point. And you're right. I mean, I think my response of just number of return calls that I got, maybe 10. So what is that? A 5% response rate, something like that. Which is not going in. That's probably about what I would have guessed more or less. I certainly wasn't expecting to get 100 callbacks. I mean, most of those I'm sure didn't even get open. They went in the trash.
Yeah. And what I see is about that 5 to 10% return rate a lot of times in terms of sending those mailers out. So there you go. If you're out there thinking about writing letters, you can expect maybe 5 to 10%, but the less you send, the less predictable that percentage is. So just keep that in mind too.
Yeah. And that's the amount you get back. I mean, how many of those are businesses you want or are acquirable? So that's just your starting point. So it's tough.
Yeah. And I get a lot of callbacks that's like, hey, I thought I'd see how much you're going to offer me for my laundromat, and they're not really even selling unless you're like going to give them, a ridiculous amount or it's like this laundromat really is not going to be a viable laundromat for anybody, even. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that'll come back. So that's a great point too. So that's what you're getting back. And out of those 10, out of curiosity, how many of them were like viable deals for you? If you know.
So, well, I guess it depends how we want to define viable. So there was, I would say 3 of them I spent a reasonable amount of time doing diligence on. The first one that got back to me was like a mile from the house I grew up in. So I was like, super excited to hear where this guy was. And he was in a pinch because he basically did no due diligence. He had owned it for maybe 6 months and knew he was in over his head. And it was like, I want out, like, please help me. Mile from my house, desperate seller. I'm like, good, got it. There were, you name an equipment manufacturer, they had that kind of machine. And it was 15 to 20 years old.
Yeah.
It was a mess. The financials, if they were what they said, were good. Like it was a profitable business. But the guy was just so burnt out with repairs and it was a mess. And he wanted the hard part too, with something like this I found, which I didn't even expect would be an issue. He was anchored to the price he paid. I would not have paid what he paid.
Yeah.
And so there was going to be this challenge there that I anticipated coming. I was slow. I was kind of dragging my feet because it was a big laundromat. I mean, it was a few thousand square feet and something like 50 or 60 washers. So it would have been a big deal for me personally, just the size of that business. And he got impatient and hired a broker as I was prepared to kind of put down an offer. And I'm pretty sure he got what he bought it for. Someone else had a similar view of him that, hey, this business makes $100,000 a year. And so, you want to put a 4 to 5 multiple on that, which some people wanted to. Mm-hmm. They'll pay, $450,000 or something. The equipment, the washers are 20 years old. I hope it works out, but that wasn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of that right now, right? And that's part of this being sort of a buyer's market where there's some people who just either want to get in, and so they're going to get in however they can, or there's people who can look at something and see things that other people can't see, right? And maybe somebody found this thing and was like, yeah, all those washers need to be replaced. It's going to cost me $750,000 to do it. But, I'm looking at this opportunity because of X, Y, and Z variables that are in the favor of this thing. And I think I can make it work. Right. So hopefully it does work out for whoever bought that one. Okay. So that one didn't go through. Tell us about another one, the second one.
So there was another one that exact same. This guy bought it 6 months ago. Didn't do enough work. I'm in over my head. Please help me. Equipment was even older. It was like all 20-year-old top loads. The dryers are probably older than I am, maybe. I don't know. But it had a dry cleaning business as well, which was a wrinkle I was not anticipating.
Oh, yeah.
And I did no work on dry cleaning. I mean, I work in the financial services industry, and I've noticed year by year, the amount of money I spent on dry cleaning was going down. Like, that just, to my personal view, was like, that's not a growth industry. But I was like, hey, that's a cool little wash, dry, fold setup where you're dry cleaning. And they didn't have equipment there, dry cleaning equipment. They would just go to the bigger places that do that.
Okay.
It was in I would say, middle upper class neighborhood, which was kind of weird for a laundromat. But I was like, this is actually pretty cool for wash, dry, fold. But I got to re-equip it. And I don't know how to do wash, dry, fold. And I don't know if that's a business I want to get into right away. And so I would say one of like the key lesson for me there was like, know your buy box. I think you've talked about this kind of stuff before. And like, that could be a really cool setup for the person who wants to retool it and set up wash, dry, fold and knows how to do that. I didn't want that big of a bite my first go around. So I reluctantly stepped away from that. I don't know what ended up happening, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah. Well, that's good for you, man. Because I think that is that's where people go wrong. I see people go wrong a lot of times, right? Is they're buying things they don't really want for, just to get in the business, or they don't really understand kind of what they're buying, or they're biting off more than they can chew, which sounds like maybe is what happened to these first two owners here, where they just sort of bit off more than they could chew and found themselves in a situation where they wanted to get out or needed to get out. What's interesting about that deal is that, number one, I mean, I think a lot of people probably are listening to this right now and like salivating, like, dude, that sounds an idiot great. I am. Yeah, that sounds great. I would love that falling in my lap right now.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's just a lot of people looking, but kudos to you for sort of sticking to your guns there and saying, you know what, that's not me. That's not going to fit. Speaking of like having a coach and helping get clarity on what you want your life to look like and all that, like, kudos to you for having a good understanding of this is sort of what I want my business to look like, at least for now.
Yeah.
And sort of sticking your guns on that. That's not easy to do sometimes.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, I don't know if hindsight's kind of 2020. That day, I literally pulled out of the parking lot for that laundromat, and that's when I got a call from the place I did ultimately acquire. And so that did take up most of my time because that fit my buy box a lot better. So had that not existed, maybe I would have twisted my own arm into doing something with that second one. Who knows? So maybe I'm giving myself too much credit for being disciplined when, opportunity just fell in with option number 3.
Yeah. Well, hey, sometimes what's luck is when, what is it? Preparation meets
opportunity.
So opportunity, right? So
something like that.
Hey, listen, man, it's kind of lucky somebody called you right as you were pulling out there that same day. But if you hadn't done that, then you might have missed the opportunity that you actually was going to be the best fit for you. However, I mean, there's nothing wrong also with just, adjusting the vision, right? And if it came back down to that second one, then I'm sure you could have made it work. And, there's nothing wrong with that either. But, with all that said, it sounds like it did work out for you better. So talk to us about the one you ended up buying.
Yeah. So it was owned by a woman who inherited it from her boyfriend. I don't think they were ever married. He passed in 2020 or 2021. She just did not, I don't think she really wanted this. This was just kind of an asset that he had, and for whatever reason gave it to her. And so she had been operating it for a few years. So when I first started talking to them, the pitch was, hey, we've been thinking about selling. It's not really for her. She was born and raised outside the country and I think wanted to return home. And so owning this didn't make sense. But hey, we've had this employee who's been here 7 years. She works every day, 365 days a year. And I'm like, and she'll teach you the ropes. And she was amazing. She's like, this is my life. Like, she was so committed to the laundromat. The owner's son, the guy who passed, he manages the place and kind of does coin collections and does a lot of the other stuff. Like, great. So I have a manager who I can learn from for the first, 3 to 6 months. And I have an employee who knows where all the skeletons are and can teach me everything. And she could do way above it. Like, I wouldn't say she could repair machines, but she could fix coin jams. She could fix a lot of the smaller things, like way above and beyond a traditional kind of worker for a laundromat. So I was like, this is really good for me, the newbie who knows nothing, to go ride the coattails of these people while I figure things out. Came to terms pretty quickly. While we were negotiating things, the worker said, hey, my mom's sick, out of the country. I'm leaving like very soon. I'll stay a little, but I'm gone. The family of the owner who passed was very upset that this woman was selling it outside the family. So that guy stopped returning my calls. And now I very quickly lost my support system that I was very excited to get into.
I was noticing the past tense language you were using, and was anticipating some sort of train wreck happening.
The turn.
But that's pretty rough, man, when you're expecting that and you feel like you're buying that. Because I mean, that's having an employee who's been around that long, who kind of knows. There's pluses and minuses to that, but it's part of the asset of that you're buying, right? Or like, when you're anticipating them staying, it's part of the asset of like, hey, they're going to help me get this thing off the ground. And so that's a pretty big blow there. So, but nothing's ever easy in the industry. So it's not insurmountable.
So, and then the other wrinkle in this one was they were on a month-to-month lease and had been for a few years or something like that. And so I basically said, like, there's no deal unless I have a long-term lease. That took 6 months. And I won't even say to negotiate. There was no negotiating. It was me calling and emailing the leasing agent every week and saying, hey, where are the terms? Where's the lease? Is that coming? And that took 4 of the 6 months, was me just calling him every week, waiting, not negotiating, just like, can you tell me what the initial offer was? And so in the meantime, being the research guy, I'm researching what are all the different angles you can negotiate and things you should ask for. And there's like, I should ask for a TI allowance, and I should ask for co-tenancy clause. And this was in a pretty good shopping center. There's a Dollar Tree, there's a Michael's, there's a TJ Maxx, there's some fast cash places like a Habit Burger. I don't know how widespread those are outside of California, but pretty good shopping center. So I had all these terms. I was all ready to negotiate, and he's just like, no. No.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
you're the 1,400 square foot laundromat at the corner. You're not TJ Maxx. You're not Dollar Tree. Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and that's pretty common too. Like, listen, there's a lot of content out there, saying a lot of stuff, but a lot of that content is older now, and things have changed pretty dramatically in the last, I'd say, 3 to 5 years. Things have changed pretty dramatically, and so it's much more difficult, especially if you're not going to be sort of the anchor tenant of a center or something like that. It's pretty difficult to get things like TI is tenant improvements. That's money the landlord gives for you to improve the space, the interior space of your business. Rent abatement still around a little bit, but landlords have gotten more and more stingy with that. And I've seen a lot of, all the rent abatement I've ever negotiated for myself has been like, you don't pay rent for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. But now I've seen more and more of like, okay, we'll defer your payments for 3 months, 6 months. Things have just gotten tighter and tougher, and landlords have not had to negotiate as much as they used to.
Yeah.
At least in some of the bigger markets. And Southern California is the biggest market, right? New York, Southern California, the biggest markets. And so these landlords they're tough cookies, man. So were you negotiating with, I'm assuming there was no broker, so I'm assuming it was you negotiating with this leasing agent, or trying to, I guess.
It was me and my agent, Mr. ChatGPT, which I've been a very liberal user of it. God bless it. I don't know what I would have done with a lot of my figuring out of things. There was a friend of a friend who was a broker, and so I kind of picked his brain, but I felt it was a limited resource. I didn't want to, the guy wasn't getting paid on this, and he lived across the country. I wasn't going to call him up every week for every little detail. So yeah, basically me on my behalf doing that. And then I did use an escrow company for actually executing the transaction, to run title and all that stuff, just to know there weren't any outstanding liabilities or anything. I think it was a few $1,000 maybe, and we split it 50-50. So like $1,500 to make sure I'm not inheriting, some debt bomb, or this lady who is the girlfriend of the guy who died doesn't actually own title to this. Like, It's a good insurance policy in my mind.
Yeah, 100%. If you're going outside of, even if you're going inside of like a broker relationship, either way, you should have either an escrow company or a lawyer, depending on what area you're in. In any area, you can have a lawyer do it. In a lot of states, you can also have an escrow agency or officer do it. But just to, keep any earnest money deposit, you don't ever give that to the seller. You give that to a third party that's going to hold it in escrow, and enforce the terms of the agreement, all that stuff, right? So that's huge, and you definitely need to do that if you're acquiring a business. And, making sure that the seller actually owns a business sounds kind of ridiculous. Like, of course they're selling it, of course they own it, but that is not a given whatsoever. And I've seen some nightmare things happen with people thinking they're buying an asset that they're not buying because the seller did not have the ability to sell, or there were other people who also owned that did not sign off on. That is another thing. So huge there. Real quick, going back to the landlord. I'm assuming you eventually got something sort of negotiated. Were you able to get enough years? And did they give on anything, or they gave on nothing? And
so I got 3 years, no increases on rent.
Okay.
I think that was probably the best thing I got. Otherwise it was pretty much everything they wanted. I do think, though, rent probably hadn't been increased in probably a few years, and they kept it at that rate. So I have that rate for 3 years. It's definitely above. If I was I kind of think of a traditional laundromat as in a smaller, there's a liquor store and a nail salon and a dry cleaner, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
I pay a premium on a per square foot to that, but it's not outrageous. And I do think it attracts a different client base. People can walk. There's a Target, there's an Amazon Fresh, there's a Staples, there's a movie theater. Like there's a bunch of stuff either in my shopping center or, one point of it across the street in any direction. So it's a pretty unique spot for a laundromat that attracts, I think, a pretty good customer base, and keeps it quiet, from a drama standpoint, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, and that's huge, right? Because, being in a bigger shopping center like that, obviously you get a lot of foot traffic coming by and a lot of exposure just through that. Although it can be hard to stand out like on the street when you've got, Target, TJ Maxx, like all these big anchor Dollar Tree, tenants that have the big marquee signs. It can be really hard to stand on the street, but they're drawing a lot of your target demographics. So if you can capture their attention once they're in the shopping center, that's huge. But it also does, like you said, it does a whole lot to deter, people who shouldn't be hanging out at your laundromat from hanging out there, even if it's unattended. Is your laundromat unattended, attended, partially attended?
So partially attended. That worker who'd been there a long time, she worked at a school down the street. And so she would basically just zigzag. She'd do her school thing, check in for an hour, go to school. And so she'd visit it, I don't know, 3 to 5 hours a day would be my guess. And so I've largely kept that with the staff, which I guess gets me to staff. So staffing took me a while, but I finally was able to get 2 employees. One I've had basically since the beginning, and then another started in the summer. And so they've been there 6 or 9 months each, and they work around 6 hours a day, roughly. So kind of a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon, and then closing.
Were you able to hire the first employee before you opened, or did it take a little time after you took over? Yeah,
there was a gap. I mean, since the closing process was so long to negotiate, and then I didn't want to start the escrow process till I actually had a lease. So that also extended another, 30 or 45 days. So there was a lot of time for me to, sit in this room and think about what I was going to do once I got the keys. And so part of that was also the hiring process, which all's well that ends well. But obviously, as I'm sure everyone who's talked about labor with you, it's not easy.
Yeah. How did you go about finding that first one?
So I did what everyone said, which is you put the poster up at your store because that's who you want to hire, right? The only person who called, mumbly left me a voicemail every day for 2 weeks. That was the only lead I got, was some person I was not comfortable calling back. So I did Craigslist, which I kind of seems like there's mixed reviews. Some people like it, some don't. Me being stingy, I liked that versus Indeed or some of the others that are going to be more expensive. My angle that I think helped me though was I used a website. I think it's called tally.co or tally.com, something like that. It's a free survey website. And so on my Craigslist job posting, I gave kind of the general overview of the business and what I was looking for. And then I said, click this link for a quick job application. I don't expect people, part-time laundromat attendants are not going to have resumes. Probably not. But can they answer 10 questions in 5 minutes and show that they're interested and can follow directions? So anyone who just emailed back on the Craigslist thing, I didn't call them back because that shows they're not reading this thing and they can't follow instructions. And so everyone who filled out that questionnaire, which was, what's your customer service experience? Have you worked at a laundromat? What's your cleaning experience? What languages do you speak? Things like that. That again, ChatGPT, not that they're a legal advisor, but can at least tell me if I'm doing anything from a HR perspective that's going to get me in trouble. From a discriminatory standpoint, made sure I was asking appropriate questions. And that was very helpful to distill the pool down. Still had to, wade through some not, I would say not great people, but just people that you don't feel super comfortable relying on.
Yeah. Not
get
good
your fair
candidates.
No-shows. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
There were a few people. So I think I've hired 4 or 5 people so far. One filled out all the paperwork, did everything, and then just never showed up for her training. One showed up for her training and I think said, "Oh my God, this is actually real work. I don't want to do this." And so she politely declined after training for I think an hour or so. Realized it wasn't for her, which I appreciate. Like she told me, "Hey, this isn't for me." She didn't just agree to a shift and then never come.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, you kind of prefer that, I guess. At least she was honest with herself and with you.
No one's going to hurt my feelings. Like this laundromat's not my child. Just tell me and we can move on, and you can go do something that you're excited about. And I'll do the same. So I really couldn't care less if people think this is the stupidest job in the world. I'll find someone else that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the mentality that we should have. It's hard. I mean, I think, when the laundromat is sort of your main thing, or, it is sort of your child, it can get feel a little more emotional, I think, for owners, and can feel a little hurt. Like, what do you mean you don't want to work here? This is the greatest place ever. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's that perspective that you just shared of like, hey, if this is not the right fit for you, go do the thing that is going to be the right fit for you, and I'll find the right person that this is the right fit for. That's the perspective to have, right? And honestly, it's a hard one to hold in this business because the turnover is so high, and what did you do during the gap? Because a lot of times we're like, we just got to hire somebody to have a body in here, so we don't have a gap. So did you man it, or what did you do?
So yeah, I was very hands-on at the beginning, as you'd expect. So I was in there. I would say the majority of days during the week. I can't honestly say I was there every day. Mm-hmm. And then that long tenured worker would check in once in a while on kind of call it pro bono basis to help out. Because again, she was like, this meant more to her than it did to me, I think, this business. Yeah. She was extremely committed. So I'm very grateful for the time she did help out and help bridge the gap there. And then I had the workers come in, and so they work basically 4 days and 3 days each. But another thing, like on retention, because that's my biggest fear too, is like, I want to have some standards and I'll say discipline, but like, they're older than me. So there's some age dynamic that feels a little awkward, but like I'm their boss and I set the rules, but I don't want to be a disciplinarian that they hate talking to and dealing with, and then they quit. So I give them a lot of latitude on shifts. I say, hey, you need to work 2 hours in the morning, roughly. If that's 9 to 11 or 10 to 12 or 11 to 1, I care a little. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. If stuff's getting done and we're avoiding, major issues with customers, I'm happy. And so I want to give them that latitude. I have a bonus program where if they've been there 6 months, I give them quarterly bonuses. We're just starting that with the first one, so I'm still kind of defining what that is. But I felt like anything I can do around the edges to give them a little bit better experience as an employee is going to help my retention, because that's the biggest. I don't want to have to close on a whim because of a no-show. And I've had no-shows. They've, outside of those couple kind of false start hires, they're always there on time doing their stuff. They've been very reliable. So I'm probably luckier than most so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's really easy to be on time when it's, sort of nebulous, like you just kind of come in. So that's good though. No, but that's how I handled it too. Right. I had a unattended mat, and then I had a cleaner basically come in for about 2 hours a day. And, what I would tell her is, or I had multiple, but I would tell them is, come in for 30 minutes sometime mid-morning ish and just do a quick tidy up, and then come in at the close and, clean up and close the store for me. And a similar kind of mindset of like, listen, if you want to come in at 10 or 12 or whatever mid-morning, it doesn't matter to me what time, as long as it's kind of getting tidied. And same in the evening, actually, like we would close at 10. And I was like, if you want to come 8 to 10 and close up at 10, that's great. If something happens, you can't come till 9, till 9:30 or 10:30 or whatever, like that's fine too. If you want to come at 10 and close and then clean, that's fine too. Kind of whatever works for you. And I found that was, because the main task was cleaning and the timing didn't matter as much, being flexible there, it paid off big dividends for me. Now, if I was doing wash and fold and somebody had to come before close and pick up their clothes, then obviously the timing matters more. But, on that partially attended store, that unattended store was not a make or break. And that did help, like the mentality or the atmosphere of the work environment there. So,
Yep. But then I have my other employee. She's like, just tell me the hours, and those are my hours. And I told her come 10 to noon, and between 9:50 and 9:58, she texts me every day that she's there. And that's kind of how I manage the timing. Is I have them just text me, and that's my time clock.
Nice.
And that's what she wants. And so she wants the structure of, this is my shift, and within 5 minutes, that's what she does.
She's there.
The other one,
that's awesome.
Her schedule kind of bounces around, and she does works for her, and the place is clean and we get good reviews. So what do I care?
That's right. Yeah. As long as customers are happy and everything's working, there you go.
Yeah.
Real quick, can I jump back to before you bought? And did you do a whole lot of due diligence, especially with kind of the long time horizon and stuff? What did due diligence look like for you?
Yeah. So fortunately, I guess I left this part out. The owner, I'm pretty sure English was her second language, so there were some challenges there. She had an attorney who had helped a lot of the administering of the estate and financial affairs. And so he was my main point of contact, which provided, not that having an attorney all of a sudden makes everything like above board and that all the numbers are what they say they are. But I felt there was some validity to things, having, a professional such as an attorney on their side. So they sent me 2 years of bank statements, basically from when the owner passed and they created a new LLC. All those bank statements, utility bills. I did a couple coin counts. This is partially, I think, me being lazy and self-serving, but I convinced myself that if you want to deceive a seller, you can do coin counts all day long, unless I'm going to put a sleeping bag in the coin room or something.
Yeah.
There's going to be deceit. So I did a week of coin count. It generally correlated to what they said the revenue was. I got a 1 year of tax returns because that's all they had. Everything kind of correlated. I felt good about the owners. I don't have a strong opinion. I mean, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I mean, it's a little bit of woo woo. Does this feel right? They didn't feel like they were trying to pull one over on me. And all the numbers generally made sense from the different sources. Is revenue ultimately going to be off to my benefit or to my detriment? Probably. It's probably not exactly what I think it is. But it's about right. The price I'm buying it at feels good. And I think that's kind of all I needed. I mean, that's kind of the industry we're in, right? Unless you have like a Laundry Works or something that gives you a little more definitive, definition of what revenue is. So that's kind of the due diligence that I did on the financial side.
Yeah, awesome. And so then when you took over, I mean, was it pretty accurate, or were there any big surprises?
There were some. So the part that I did not appreciate, which makes total sense when you think about it, but like the seasonality of the laundry business. So I closed middle of May.
Okay.
May was solid. June was way above what I thought. And so I just extrapolated that and I just said, okay. And then July came and I think business was down probably 20%, June to July. And I said, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Or what are we doing wrong? I'm living and breathing and dying every coin collection and count on like, oh my God, like this is going to zero. Like business is, I'm like, jiggling my coin boxes and there's nothing there because it's 95 degrees outside or 110. I don't know if you remember, there was that like horrible heat wave in California.
Yeah.
And we just had no business. And there was definitely a 30 to 60 day period of panic, to be sure.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows all July we only wear Speedos and bikinis too, which, not a lot of laundry there. So
correct.
No, but that's common, right? And especially, in places where it gets hotter or sometimes in the winter where it snows a lot or ices and people don't go out as much. There is seasonality there. And in Southern California, I see typically 10 to 15% on average where revenue will drop in the summer and then bounce back in the fall when all the disgusting children go back to school and need all their clothes washed. But yeah, that's scary. That's panic moment where you're like riding this high of June and you're like, we're going to the moon. And then July comes and you're like, we're done. This is it. It's over.
Yep.
We're going to zero. Yeah.
So we did that. And then the other big thing I did that I was pushing towards. So they had a few fast card readers, credit card readers on their bigger washers.
Okay.
And that was maybe 20 to 30% of the revenue, something like that. I was very big on the automation side of things. And so from a very early stage was having my eye on like a LaundryWorks kind of system to get away from the coins. My first 60 days of owning it only accelerated that view that I hate quarters. Managing the coin jams. They hadn't done any maintenance on the changer. And so that was my first, drop the phone and go over there. We can't make change. You don't have a business. You do, but you pretty much don't have a business if you can't make change. Yeah. And it was just maintenance. I thought the worker I inherited who helped out just kind of told me like, yeah, this is what it does. And we had two, and she'd tell me if lefty broke, it makes righty break too. And I said, well,
awesome.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. And she's like, that's just what it does. And so I said, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It turns out we just needed to spend a few $100 to repair these so they actually work. And buy, some smart plugs. So I can, on my phone, I can do a reset if it's something like that. So little by little, you just kind of learn every every hiccup you run into is an opportunity to learn, what do I do here from an automation standpoint so that this is the only time I have to do that. Or I can at least build in some resiliency. But even then, it's still, if someone jams in $1 and screws it up, I can't reset that remotely. So, and the coin jams and all that, managing refunds with Venmoing people, I hated all of it. Coin counting. I'm a data-driven person. I want to know what the machines are doing. I don't want to hear anecdotally, yeah, our top loads are really popular. People like them. I don't even know what that means. And so I bought a coin scale and I'm counting, how many turns are our top loads doing? How many turns are our 30 pounds doing? That's going to inform what's popular, and how I should price things. If my top loads are being used a ton, I'll probably raise prices a little bit. And so that was a big push for me early on, was just understanding, like, I don't want to hear anecdotally what works. It's like, show me the numbers of where are we actually making our money.
Yeah, which is huge, right? Like that's massive. And that's, we talk about that a lot on the podcast, right? Getting the right data and making decisions based on that data, and doing some analysis on that data to help you, improve your business, right? And know exactly how you should be running it. Did you end up, have you ended up yet getting a card payment system or any sort of digital payment system?
Yeah. So my original plan, which I think, you and I think some others, I don't know if you've been this explicit, but like, for like 6 months, right? 6 months, don't do anything. Learn the business, see how it ticks. I had a 5-page Word document of stuff I wanted to do the day I got the keys.
I love it.
I started, it had just been neglected. They had 2 vending machines that had been vandalized and were broken and were just sitting there doing nothing but taking up space. And we're 1,400 square feet. We don't have space.
Yeah.
So I got, I don't know, $400 or $500 for those within a week and just got them the heck out of there. We had the old coin push soap dispenser that, again, broken, vandalized, not being used. Got that out of there. We didn't have hand soap. How do you not have hand? Like, we had no hand soap. It boggled my mind. And our paper towel thing didn't work. The lady's like, yeah, when you pull, you gotta also go in and pull, otherwise it won't work. Like what? Just a bunch of stuff like that I just feel like it's not in aggregate. I mean, we're talking a few $100 here, which I can pay for by selling these broken vending machines. And it like has such an impact on consumer experience to have soap and paper towels to wash your hands. Like super basic stuff. The fans were broken. Just all that kind of stuff. Did that super quick. I'm like totally diverging away from your question of Coinless.
No, well, real quick. I mean, I just want to say I am not actually a proponent of not doing anything in the first 3 to 6 months. I know a lot of people are that. I'm a proponent of getting in and making the improvements ASAP that need to be made. Now, some cases you're buying like a turnkey laundromat, maybe you don't do anything and that's fine. But if there are improvements to be made, I think you make the improvements ASAP because it's only going to help your business. And not only that, one thing that I learned when I bought my first laundromat and had to basically retool the whole thing, I learned it was relatively easy to retool the laundromat, put new equipment in there, do, some of the things you're talking about, the paper towel holder thing didn't work, all these little things that were just kind of new, a nuisance to customers. What was much more difficult was rehabbing the reputation of the laundromat. And if you can start doing that day one by making improvements, I think that's a huge win. So I'm actually not a proponent of waiting 3 months or whatever before you start making changes. I think you make changes ASAP. Now, maybe you don't make a whole lot of really big changes, but maybe you do. I made big changes, by retooling my store within the first few weeks as soon as those machines came in. Like, that's a big change. I wasn't going to sit around with half the machines broken, some of the top loaders half full of water because they won't drain, and the condition it was in. I was going to make improvements. So I'm actually, I like what you did. So
good,
stamp of approval. Not that you needed it, but I'm giving it to you anyways. Okay.
Yeah. And I guess to that point, our reviews it was kind of your standard, there was no website. We didn't have a phone number too, which also, like, I'm the last guy that wants to get all the phone calls for all the, stuff that people want to call about. But like, what if there's like a flood or like I have a dryer fire and they're not going to get a phone call? Like, that just boggled my mind. So after I think probably 45 or 60 days of doing enough where I felt like there was enough of a discernible change, I went on Google and I replied to all the bad reviews. Hey, new ownership, check us out. Like, so sorry, whatever their complaint was. And perfect story. There were some, I don't know why I did this, but if it was more than like 2 years old, I didn't reply at the time. So funny story, over the weekend, I was like, why not? Like, what's the harm in going to a 5-year-old review and saying, hey, new ownership. I replied to a guy or gal, said, hey, so sorry about your experience, new ownership, we made a ton of changes, come try us out. Within 24 hours, that got changed from a 1-star to a 4-star. This person wrote like a paragraph review, new owner, like so great, you guys should come check it out. Which is like huge, especially, I mean, look, we don't have massive. 1,000 reviews. I think we're at 75 reviews or something like that. So like changing a 1 to a 4 is meaningful. And maybe that person wasn't even a customer. And so now they're spending whatever, $50 a month at our store that previously we weren't getting because I didn't write a 10-word response to them on Google.
And they're encouraging other people to come check it out. So all the better. And, you know, just kind of give you some kudos. 75 reviews is a lot of reviews. I think most laundromats don't have 75 reviews. So that's good. You know, obviously keep going, man, because the more you have, especially good ones, right? The better that is, and the more customers it'll drive to you. Okay, wait. So you ended up getting a payment system?
Yes.
I cut you off there, and I want to bring you back to it. Yeah.
So from a financial standpoint, the way I structured the purchase was I do owe the seller, I don't know, 30 or 40% of the purchase price 1 year from close. So I always had in the back of my mind, this thing needs to profit enough to pay that off at year 1. I don't want to put any more money into the business. So I kind of wrote an initial check into the business that would fund the initial portion of the purchase price as well as some of the upgrades. And then the profit from year 1 should pay back the seller for the remainder. Since the business was doing a bit better than I thought, I was getting to the point where like, well, maybe I can do laundry works too, and still be able to pay back the note. And so after a few months, it kind of felt like I was close enough.
Was this before July when you were still riding the high? You're like, oh, maybe I can do it. And then you did it. And then July came and you're like, oh no.
Fortunately not. But August was better enough to where I felt comfortable.
We're not going to zero.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I pulled the trigger on that. That got installed middle of September. And the other thing too, that was a struggle for me is with going back to the coins. I was very confident we were underpriced. I visited the half a dozen closest competitors and realized we were pretty underpriced. I would say we were on par with them aesthetically in terms of like quality of store. I was like, I can make some upgrades and we will be above average quality. We should be at least average on price, and we were below average. The problem I ran into with the bigger machines, so we have a couple 80s and 560s. The 80s are the problem. If I raise my prices, I'm just going to have to go an extra day to collect them.
Yeah.
And so on like a return on my time, I don't know that makes sense. I'm going to make an extra $1 return. And so I don't know what that's going to, maybe I make $50 a week, but then I got to go in more. And it just accelerates my coin velocity. And so I was like, I can't, there's a cap on prices unless I have someone do collections or I'm going to be there 4 or 5 days a week. And so that was another way to convince myself. Again, I kind of wanted that outcome, but I was like, let's get Laundry Works and let's really price this the way it should be priced. And so when we installed Laundry Works, we raised prices maybe 10 to 20%, depending on the machine.
Okay.
Across the board. I did the dollar match, which I talked to a few other Laundry Works users, and they were big proponents of that. I had a heart attack after 7 days of just watch. Every day I go onto the portal and just see how much money we're giving away on this match. And I originally was going to do it for 2 weeks, and I tapped out after a week. And I was just like, this is soul crushing with these people. And I was there every day teaching customers, and I tell them about the match, and we had some signage, and they're like, well, like, what's the limit on the match? I was like, I honestly don't know. And so I had people coming in without laundry, just putting $100 bill in the machine. Or the nail salon next to us, which only dries. They spend literally $1 a week at our store. I think they loaded up $200.
Awesome.
And so it was a good momentum builder for the store. I don't regret it. But I also think it's a good sleight of hand, not to be sneaky with your customers, but if I'm going to raise my prices, I at least have something to go, hey, like I'm giving you free money. Yeah, we're raising prices. By the way, we're still cheaper than our competitors. But we're trying to work with you here. And you know, the price of everything's going up, right? It's not like it's hard to see that we're not greedy. I think it's a very reasonable ask of customers. And we've received no pushback. I did another price increase a month ago. We're kind of at a point where I feel more comfortable with our pricing. Still little to no pushback.
Was there, okay, so I want to ask you this because there's a huge fear for a lot of owners going from, did you get rid of coins completely? Are you only card now?
I was very hesitant to do that.
Yeah.
And I was going to go hybrid for a while. The problem I had was the kiosks were going to go where my changer was.
Mm-hmm.
And so my distributor's like, well, you could just buy a smaller changer and mount it somewhere else. And then it's like, okay, well, that's another few grand to buy that changer and whatever to install it. And I'm just going to do it for how long? 6 months or something. And it just felt like it was kind of a weenie out. And then your Laundryworks adoption is not going to be good because people don't want to change. So I made the decision to just, we'll get rid of it and we'll go coinless 100%.
Okay. So, I mean, the big fear is exactly what you were experiencing. Like, how are customers going to respond to this? So how did they respond to it? Did you feel like and maybe it's tough to know because you didn't have good data before probably, but do you feel like you lost customers? Did people complain about the card system? Did the dollar match ease everybody's frustrations? How did it go?
Yes to all of those, just depending on the customer. I had some people who literally, and I was there, I don't know, 40 or 60 hours the first 7 to 14 days a week, something like that. So we were basically fully attended and then some the first 2 weeks to hold everyone's hand. I taught a 95-year-old lady how to do it. And so once I did that, I was like, I think most people can figure it out. I invested in some nice signage to help with that. But yeah, for sure. There were some people who came in and I told them how it worked and they scoffed and they walked out the door, or they did a lap, avoided eye contact with me and ignored me and left. I did not see anything from a revenue standpoint that would suggest that like we lost 20% of our customers, or there was business has been up overall. I will say it's hard. Like now we're getting into winter and now, so business is going to be up regardless. So it's hard for me to say definitively, like we're doing 20% better because of Laundryworks. I don't know that. But I don't have to do collections anymore. I can do refunds through the system when people have issues. I don't get chargebacks. Half of our negative reviews on Google related to bank holds with FastCard. I don't want to, talk bad on them. That's just the structure they have. But people were confused that we had a $7 wash and they saw $10 on their bank statement for a couple of days. No one goes back and changes their Google review to go, oh, my bad, 5 stars. So we just have a bunch of negative reviews for bank holds. And so Laundryworks, we don't have to do that. I'm trying to think what else. Just being there to hold people's hands, you get enough critical mass that, and I think Laundryworks and laundromats in general are friendly community type places. And if you see someone just staring at the screen for a while, a friendly person will be at the laundromat to say, hey, push this, do this. And they teach each other. I think it's it's hard before you get Laundry Works to buy into that. Like, I'm going to make, a tens of thousands of dollars decision based on, well, they'll teach each other. Like, they're fine. Anecdotally, from my experience, it's been pretty good, not without its bumps. Some people are confused. I did get some pretty negative messages from customers, but they're like one-off. And I still see this person. This person was livid that it's discriminatory against old people. How dare you? You raised your prices. You're like a horrible person. I still see her. So sometimes people just want to vent. They're pissed. Like, look, $5 a week on laundry might be really meaningful to some people. I don't want to discount that. And so sometimes people just want to yell at you, and because they're in a tough spot. That's part of the job sometimes.
Yeah, no, and that's real, right? Sometimes you just need to hear people out and apologize and introduce them to the 95-year-old who was able to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, and just let people feel heard. And I think that's a big part of it, but it's hard again. I mean, I think for you, just kind of knowing your mentality a little bit and the way you're approaching the business, maybe a little bit easier to hear some of that stuff. But for, some people who this is their child, and to hear people, it can bring up an emotional response from us in retaliation. But if you can try to like have a little empathy and just hear people out, and you might lose a couple, but a lot of times, even if you lose them, they just end up coming back. Not all the time, but a lot of time they end up just coming back, and they just need to be heard. And if you can play that role for them, a lot of times that's just kind of what they need. It's kind of what they need.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it until, being in this business. I worked at a grocery store for 5 years during college, where customer service is the name of the game. And there's a lot of training there of just sucking it up, putting on a smile. And I just think of like, okay, let's go the two paths here. One path is I meet anger with anger, and I yell at them and say, how dare you, talk bad about my business, get the heck out of here. And the other is, hey, I'm really sorry that you feel that way. Happy to show you how it works. Or I'm sorry you don't like our price increase, but here's the reality of our situation with our costs. Look at all the upgrades we've made to the store to try to make this a nicer, cleaner place for you. Which path is going to help you? Like, partially I do this because it's just an easier way to deal with people, but it's also in my interest. Like, I want this laundromat to make as much money as possible. And I do that by having customers who are happy and like coming here, not ones that I fight with. So it's not all altruistic. There's some self-interest in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll also just say from personal experience, sometimes you just got to throw down with somebody,
Yeah. I mean, I did, as lucky as we've been for people, there have been some, unhoused people that I've had to, not get physical with, but had to have some tough conversations with to protect my business and make my customers feel safe.
Yeah. Yep. It's reality of the business, for sure. So, I mean, you've kind of said and alluded to a couple of times, like, business has been going pretty well for you. Like, overall, how are you feeling about this investment? Are you feeling like this was a good move for you? And like, would you do it again, out of curiosity?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think going into it, if we rewind to like before buying it, I was 10 times more worried I would buy something and then screw it up than buy something and like, knock it out. Like, I knew I was not going to overpay, because that's my background, and I was being very conservative. And so I felt very good that I would make a smart purchase. And, my wife, who's extremely risk averse, that was always my pitch to her, is like, look, if in 6 months I hate this and I stuck at it, I'm pretty sure we'll get the vast majority, if not all, of our money back. And it's a seller's market. I know these other
two guys who I talked to earlier who did the same thing, so I know it can work.
Yeah. So I knew there was kind of that parachute emergency exit kind of option. But I figured it out like I think we all do in the industry. There's more resources now than there's ever been, thanks to you and others, to learn this industry. You just kind of have to invest the time and figure things out. And I think something I've given myself some grace over is like, I hate having machines down. I hate it, especially as a smaller store. Like I don't have 20, 30-pound machines where if a couple are down, it's not that meaningful. Like, we do 5 to 8 turns a day. And so I can't have that many machines down. But like, if a machine's down for a few days, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to miss my kids' gymnastics practice to go fix a drain valve. I'll do it the next day. The business is important, but giving yourself some grace. Something's on fire. I'm missing gymnastics practice. Fortunately, I still don't know what the right amount of like dryer fire, like, panic and run over there instances are. I've had a couple. No fires, no like major blowout water issues, but a couple things. I don't know what the right number is to expect still. But just being comfortable with like, hey, sometimes stuff's going to happen is not the end of the world if the machine's down for an extra day. But again, I don't want a lot of machines down for long periods of time. So that's something I still hold to a relatively high standard, I think.
Yeah. Here's a data point for you. In a little over a decade, I've had 0 dryer fires, but I've had maybe 3 or 4 flooded like laundromats. So
okay,
that's happened a few times. There. So,
but fun story. I'll interject real quick, which I didn't cover. So closing day finally comes. We're going to meet at closing. They're going to take their cash. I'm going to get the keys, and it's mine. We basically do everything, kind of, square everything up. We're there for like an hour. We're about to close the doors and leave. And I go, oh, like, can we go check in the water room real quick? Like there was one thing I wanted to check in there. They have tankless heaters, and I just kind of wanted to make sure I understood those again. Open the door. The pipes are like, maybe not gushing, but a substantial leak. At closing time, as the business is now, the funds are gone. I don't think I have any recourse. Like this ship has sailed. Yeah. And we just all look. No one says anything. We're just staring at this pipe just leaking at 9:00 at night.
Oh no.
I go, oh no. Like, what am I getting myself into? And so I think that scarred me a little bit. So fortunately, like, complete hero, the attorney, his brother-in-law is a plumber and lives a mile away.
Oh, dude, what a champ.
So he calls the guy up. He comes down in like practically his pajamas, and we're able to at least like turn it off and avoid the leak. He shows up the next day and like welds it back. Does what? I'm not a plumber. Fixes it.
Whatever he did. Yeah.
I beg him to pay him, and he's like, "Don't worry about it." Like the attorney Matthew, he's like, "That guy's been more than kind to me and my family, so don't pay me."
Awesome.
But since that day, I'm like, I guess just every week pipes break and gush, and that's just like a normal thing.
About once a week. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I mean, there are the stories like Ross Dodds, his laundromat burned down after a week or two or a few weeks, or I can't remember what it was when he first bought his. Sean Dandridge, his whole place flooded 3 weeks in. And I mean, there's multiple people on the podcast who've had these like crazy, wild stories of like, here's what happened right after I bought my laundromat. So it does happen, but I mean, listen, it's more fun to share the horror stories than the boring days where nothing goes wrong. Right. Yeah. So, but there's a lot more of those than the crazy stories, out there, but you just hear more of those. So it doesn't happen every week, maybe every other week. Dude, this has been awesome. First of all, I've loved your story. I love the way you're approaching the business, a very sort of methodical and systematic way. It's funny to me that your big worry was that you were going to like, take over the business and screw it up. Cause to me, just as you're talking about how you've like approached everything and how you've handled like the obstacles that have happened, cause there's always obstacles, right? Just seems very like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. I know you may not know all the nuances of, laundromats when you first bought it. But in terms of like, how to solve problems, which is, 80+% of entrepreneurship, like you have that skill set. It's there. So to me, it's not surprising that you're crushing it over there. What's the future hold for you? You think you got any more laundromats in you, or you think this will be the one for you?
So I ask myself that probably weekly. The problem is I'm now spoiled with Laundry Works. And so there's 2 card stores within a few miles of me. They're not Laundry Works. So like if I'm going to kind of do a hub and spoke model of building around there, I'm probably going to acquire a coin store, and that brings a lot of extra work. And so I'm kind of debating on, do you get some help, some kind of manager, more senior person to kind of help you, be in the trenches beyond just the kind of standard attendance? Do you hire that person before you have number 2? Do you get store number 2 and then, just tread water for a bit? I don't have that solved yet. I'm still working. I feel like I'm in like maybe the bottom of the 8th of the 9-inning game of getting my store to where I really want it to be. So I'm close. But I don't know. I answer this like I answer like a job interviews. What's your 5-year plan? I don't have those kinds of plans. I want to make this store really good. And maybe I'll take my old coach's advice and just, go start another mailer strategy, and no harm in talking to people. Right. And I found the laundromat community is incredibly helpful. The idea of competitors is a lot different than like, we're not all Coke versus Pepsi or whatever. Everyone's been very, very friendly and helpful, in this industry to provide other resources or ideas. I made friends with another store owner 5 miles from me at a kid's birthday party. We just randomly met each other, and like,
that's awesome.
I'm going to watch his store in a few months, and he's probably going to watch mine when we go on vacation. It's like, we're competitors, but at the same time, it's like, hey, can you go do coin collection for me? I'm like out of the country. It's like, yeah, happy to.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how competition works in this industry, and it's good from my standpoint.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about this business too, when it comes to like competition, right, is you really only have a few true competitors, right? Like you're probably not competing over one single customer with the guy 5 miles down the road. Like there's probably not one person sitting in the middle there being like, should I go to his or should I go to yours?
Yeah.
Right. So while you're competitors in the sense that you're doing the same thing, like you're really only competitors with a handful of people right around you. And even then, you're really only competing, over a small contingency of those customers most of the time. Because most of the time, the majority of the people who are going to their laundromat are going there because it's just the most convenient place for them to go. And the majority that are going to yours are going for the same reason. And then there's some smaller subset of people who have the option and prefer to go to one or the other that you're competing over. So it is an interesting, industry to be in when it comes to competitors. And it is, I think one of the reasons this podcast has been so successful in interviewing owners is because you can jump on here and say, hey, I went coinless to 100% card. Here's how it was for me, because it's not going to negatively impact your business to tell people that, right? Because you're really just not competing with very many people across the nation, which is a pretty cool dynamic. So it does allow for that sharing to happen, which I love.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, that I really want better data on, and I just haven't found a good way to do it, is why do I not get certain customers? Why do my competitors, if I'm cheaper, not that I am now, but I was, if I'm cheaper and cleaner, why are you not coming to my store? And the only people you got to talk to your customers. Ask your customers. My customers are already coming to my store. Like they already like my product, more or less. Maybe they want some things changed here or there. Outside of going to a competitor's store and literally poaching them, which I'm not at all comfortable doing, how do we get data to understand what are we missing as store owners that's not capturing other customers? I don't know how to do. I want to do that, and sometimes I'll ask customers, I haven't been here in 3 years. Like, this is really cool. And I go, why? And I never get useful answers. It's, well, I used to go to the place by my work, and now I don't. Now I come here. Well, I don't know what to do with that.
Can't extrapolate that to everybody else.
Yeah. So
yeah, like it's an interesting question, right? And as I was thinking, I'm like, there's probably ways to do that. Just one that off the top of my head, I've never heard anybody do this, and this might not be a good idea. So, anybody out there who wants to try it, let me know how it goes if you do try it. But, I'm thinking like you could geofence your competitors, and instead of necessarily running them direct ads to your business, you could, and just so everybody's clear, what geofencing is, where you basically put a virtual fence around your competitor. So anybody who goes within that fence, you can run ads to them. So basically all the customers of your competitors, you can run ads to, right? So I'm wondering if there's like, hey, take a 2-question survey and get LaundroWorks credit for our store. If you do that and just say, hey, what do you love about the laundromat that you're at right now? And what do you not like about that laundromat? Or like whatever the questions are, right? To try to get a couple of useful data, and then you incentivize them to come to your store by saying, hey, we're over here. We've got, here's a $5 credit or a $10 credit or whatever that we'll put on your LaundroWorks card. And, that might be an interesting way to do it.
For sure. That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, it's just getting again, going back to like data, just like why our industry is not good at data. I think we're getting better, but just getting a better understanding for why do customers behave the way they do. It's fascinating. I would like to, that's kind of a goal I think about, but it's just hard to really get a definitive action plan.
Yeah. I mean, I think you get a lot of answers like, this is the closest one to me, or I walk and yours is too far to walk to, or, a lot of that stuff. But like I said, there is that small subset of people that you are competing over that it would be interesting to get their feedback from.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. We'll see.
Well, dude, this is awesome. I think a lot of people who are trying to get their first laundromat will have loved this interview. Number one, do you have like one piece of advice? Say there's somebody that was 12 months ago looking for that laundromat. Do you have one piece of advice on what could help them get that first laundromat?
I mean, it's a little, I guess, counterintuitive advice, but just being patient for like your buy box. I would say you probably would lose a lot more sleep over buying something you shouldn't have bought than not buying something you could have or should have, perhaps. I mean, you never know if you should have if you didn't buy it, but don't force a deal. I definitely felt that pressure with that first one that was really close to the house I grew up in. Was like, this is it. Like, no one else is calling me back on my mailer. This guy's interested.
Yeah.
It's now or never. And I'm almost glad that he went with a broker, because even at the price I probably was going to offer, it would have been a lot of work. Even if I didn't do a retool, like just all the different machines, it's just big. It was a big store, and I don't know if I was ready for that. And so, that's probably not advice to get you, any listener to buying a store faster, but hopefully it's a better situation in the long term to get something that truly fits whatever kind of experience that you would want to have as an owner, however that's defined. And being realistic, like I said, I think about wash, dry, fold now, like how can I make that work? but I'm also not comfortable to execute on that right now. And so I'm just not spending time on that. I think that's an easy thing for people to pitch and go, oh, like you add wash, dry, fold, it's going to double the value of the store. It's like, it's not, you don't just hang it. The store we had used to do wash, dry, fold. The store I own used to do it way back when, and they stopped. I don't think they stopped because it was making too much money.
Rarely is that the case. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to execute. It's easy to say, like, we're just going to do it and people show up and I'll make an extra few grand a month or whatever. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of extra staff. I don't want to do that right now. So I'm not. So just being very clear about what you want and staying disciplined to that. And unfortunately, maybe that extends your timeline, but I'm glad I was patient. I didn't have to be that patient, but I did have to wait a little bit and it was uncomfortable. So I guess that's what I'd say.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who did not get that advice, and so thanks a lot for nothing. I don't know. You were probably 10 when I bought my first laundromat, and bought one that was rough, like losing money when I was expected to be making money, and all the problems. Go listen to episode 1 if you've never heard that story. But I will vouch for everything that you're saying. It is much worse to buy something that you shouldn't have bought and having to deal with the consequences of that for long periods of time, rather than passing even on a good deal. If you pass on, I'd rather pass on a good deal than buy a bad deal all day, every day, as somebody who has bought a bad deal and suffered the consequences of that. So totally. I think it's great advice. And I think, it's hard to be patient right now, especially where it can be a little bit more difficult than in the past to find a deal. It's hard to be patient, but I genuinely believe the advice you're giving is really good. It's better to pass on a good deal than buy a bad deal. And obviously try to buy the good deal. But if you're not sure, either get some outside input, or pass on it till you're more sure. So, I think it's great.
And I'd say if I can add one more too, I think as I spend more time at my competitors, I did that over the holidays and just kind of thinking about and I think Waleed Cope's newsletter over the weekend kind of hit on this, that there's a lot of zombie mats out there, and I'm sure some are negligent owners, but some are people who just are not literally making enough money to keep the store the way they probably want. Mm-hmm. I'm in a fortuitous position in that I have a day job, so I don't need to pull money out of this business every week and month. But the alternative is if and when you buy a business, making sure you have enough to execute the plan you want. I put in more money than I needed to because I had a plan to do a lot of, I'd say renovations, but upgrades. And just finding out okay, what is the right amount of money that this business needs to get it to where it needs to go? If you have to spend every last penny just to get your foot in the door and it's a business that's break even or maybe not making enough, you might find yourself in a difficult position, especially if the numbers aren't what you think they are, or something happens, or you have 2 back-to-back months of really bad repairs or a plumbing issue or whatever. So just making sure there's a little extra juice to execute your plan and not find yourself in a stressful situation where, financials become a real problem for you.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And I saw that Waleed's newsletter. So make sure you subscribe if you're not to Wash Weekly. But and it was right. And Waleed's point there was hey, there's a person behind that zombie mat. Let's try to exercise a little empathy and compassion. A lot of times, and this was the case for me, early on when I was struggling. I wanted to do more, but I was losing money, hand over fist, hand over foot. I don't know what that saying is now that I'm trying to say it.
Hand over fist.
But okay, fist? Is it fist?
I think, I don't know.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. But there's a person behind that. Right. And so the takeaway there is when you're getting into the business, just like you're saying, hey, just make sure you've got a little runway, you've got a little cushion, and that you've got as clear of an understanding of the business as you can before it becomes yours too. Right. And you kind of reference maybe if it's not making as much money as you thought it was, and which happens a lot in this business. So do the best you can. And, but just, know that the less runway you have on the back end after the purchase in terms of money, the riskier it becomes. Not to say that you can't do it. I've talked with a lot of people who got in with their last penny, their last dime, and had to put in a whole lot of sweat equity to make the thing work. And it was a long road, but they made it work. And you can make it work that way, but it just becomes more risky the less runway you have after that purchase there. So
yeah. Yep.
Which you love risk, obviously.
I say align your seller. It was, I'll say almost non-negotiable to me to have some component of seller finance. Maybe it's easier said than done, especially if it's like there's a broker and there's 20 other offers or something. But if you have a seller who really is not comfortable like extending you credit on the business that's supposedly good, because I'm sure they're telling you it's a great business, it's kind of a red flag. And maybe if you can't negotiate it, at least, get a really good answer for why that's literally not possible for them.
Yeah.
Because if they're not willing to stick their neck out a little bit for the business that they've been running, then maybe it's not such a good business.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. And that's a way to sort of mitigate some risk as well. If things turn out to not be as advertised, you've got some leeway there to play with your payments or the valuation a little bit. So,
yep. Yeah.
Jeff, man, awesome interview. Tons of great, just practical stuff within your story there. But dude, I love the way you're approaching your business. I love the way you're running your business. And I selfishly hope you go out and buy some more down the line here, because I love the way that you're doing this, man. And I love the way that you're, thinking about your customers and your employees. And I think there needs to be more owners doing that. And there are more owners thinking of their customers that way. Just treat them with a lot of value and respect, and same with employees. And I love the way you're doing it, man. So hopefully you'll go out and pick up some more, and then you can come back on here and we'll have a good time again.
Sounds good, man.
All right. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, and next time I'm back in SoCal, let's make a point to get back together.
All right. I'll get you your mail.
That's right. That's right. Or come out to Hawaii. Either way, I'm good with that.
All right.
All right, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
All right. Once again, I absolutely love the way that Jeff is approaching this business and the way that he runs his business. It's kind of refreshing to me because it just feels so polished. You know what I mean? So huge shout out to Jeff. Thanks for coming on. But listen, take one thing, put it into action this week. That's what it comes down to when it comes to your success. So put into action this week, and we'll see you again next week. Peace.